It started with the sound of gravel crunching under the tires of a truck I didn't recognize. I had been living on the same patch of land for over 40 years, a quiet 1.2 acres tucked between the oaks and a narrow strip of road that led down to a lake. My parents bought it in the late 60s, long before anyone had heard of homeowners associations in this area. Back then, the land wasn't worth much, just dirt, trees, and a view that you had to walk half a mile to see. But it was ours. Mine now after they passed. Every fence post had been hammered in by my father's hands, and every bird that landed in the yard felt like an old neighbor. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, and watched the truck stop at the far end of my property. Two men climbed out. One wore a bright orange vest, the other carried a clipboard. They didn't look like delivery guys, or utility workers, or even folks asking for directions. They were measuring something, looking at the ground like it already belonged to them. "Morning," I called out. My voice carried across the yard, a little sharper than I intended. They both turned, startled. The one with the clipboard came forward. "You the owner?" he asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Well, this parcel's been sold. We're here to mark it for preliminary inspection. HOA property now." I laughed, at first because I thought it was absurd. "HOA property? You're mistaken. I've got the deed right inside. Been in my family for half a century." The man didn't flinch. "All I know is it was auctioned off last month. Deed transferred. You can take it up with the homeowners association." The words didn't make sense in my head. HOA? We weren't part of an HOA. My house sat outside the gates of Lakebridge Estates, that fancy neighborhood they built up 20 years ago for people with more money than sense. I wasn't part of their community, never paid their dues, never attended their meetings, never signed a thing. But somehow they thought they owned my land. That night, I went digging through my files. My father's handwriting was still on some of the old documents, thick loops and proud signatures from a time when a handshake still meant something. My deed was clear. The property lines were clear. Taxes? Paid every year without fail. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office, a glass and brick building that looked more like a bank. A receptionist with a perfect smile greeted me, like I was just another neighbor asking about a pool pass. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, and explained what happened. She typed something into her computer, looked at the screen, and then at me with that kind of slow, pitying blink you see from people who think they're already one step ahead. "According to our records, your parcel was classified as abandoned and unpaid. We acquired it in a lien sale." "Abandoned?" I snapped. "I live there. And what lien? I don't know your HOA a single cent." She shrugged. "It's in the system. You'd have to take it up with the board." The board turned out to be 5 people sitting around a polished oak table, sipping coffee like judges in some private court. They listened to me talk, glanced at each other, and one of them, a man with silver hair and a smug grin, finally said, "It's all legal. We followed the procedures. The land is ours now. You can vacate voluntarily, or we'll start formal eviction." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a mistake. This was a scheme. They'd been expanding their territory for years, swallowing up small lots around the lake, claiming unpaid dues, filing quiet liens no one heard about until it was too late. And now, they had their eyes on mine. But I wasn't about to roll over. I hired the best property attorney in the county, a wiry old bulldog named Martin Price who had been fighting land disputes since the 70s. He dug into the case and found exactly what I suspected. The HOA had fabricated a membership notice they claimed had been mailed to my father in 2003 after the Lakebridge development was built. It stated that all bordering properties were grandfathered in as part of the association and subject to dues. My father never saw it, never signed it, never agreed to it. But they filed it with the county clerk anyway, buried under layers of paperwork no ordinary person would ever think to check. "This is fraud," Martin said, slapping the file down on his desk. "The problem is they're clever. They know most folks won't fight. Too expensive, too stressful. But you've got them cornered, if you're willing to play it long and patient." I told him I had nothing but time. It took months of filings, counterfilings, depositions, and hearings. The HOA kept trying to delay, knowing that the longer it dragged on, the more it would wear me down. But each delay was another rope they tied around their own ankles. Because while they were busy stonewalling, Martin and I were uncovering things they didn't want anyone to see: shady land transfers, inflated budgets, personal enrichment from community funds. One discovery changed everything. The jewel of Lakebridge Estates was their private lakefront area, dotted with a row of mansions worth millions. Problem was, the land under those homes had a murky chain of title. Turns out, decades ago, part of it had been improperly subdivided, leaving the HOA without clear legal ownership of the very ground their millionaires lived on. I bought that land. Legally. Quietly. Through a shell company Martin set up, we purchased the rights from a distant heir of the original landholder, a man living in another state who didn't even know he still owned it. When the sale was complete, I sent the HOA a notice. Their lakefront was now mine. At first, they thought it was a joke. Then they got the letter from my attorney outlining the lease terms if they wanted to remain. It wasn't cheap, and when they refused, I took the matter to court. The judge ruled in my favor. Every square foot of that lakefront was legally under my control. I didn't just own dirt and water. I owned the foundation under their $10 million mansions. The day the ruling came down, I drove back to my porch, sat in my father's old rocking chair, and let the autumn wind carry the sound of leaves across the yard. Justice didn't come fast, and it didn't come easy, but it came. In the weeks that followed, some of the mansion owners negotiated long-term leases. Others packed up and left, unwilling to pay rent for property they thought they owned outright. The HOA collapsed under lawsuits from its own members, and the board scattered like crows when the field was empty. As for me, I kept my 1.2 acres. And every time I walked down to the lake, my lake now, I thought about how easy it would have been to give up, to say they're too big, too powerful, too connected. But I remember my father's voice, steady as the hand that planted our fence posts. Land is more than earth. It's the piece of the world where you stand, where your name means something. The lesson was simple, but it took a long fight to learn it all over again. If you know what's right, you don't back down. Not for anyone. And maybe that's why, when neighbors ask about the lake, I just smile and tell them the truth. It's amazing what you can own when you refuse to be owned.